Good morning, all. I am thrilled to be here today with you and with someone who has come a long way to join us today. Since May 1st, 2014, Carsten Spohr has been Chief Executive of the Lufthansa Group, a global aviation group with 11 airlines and 108,000 employees worldwide. And I understand even with all those responsibilities, you have stayed current on your Lufthansa captain's license to fly the Airbus A320?
In Lufthansa, one job doesn't pay a living, so
Well, great. Carsten, I understand you have an announcement for us this morning.
Well, not just for us. Indeed, we are about, I think in a few hours, to announce a major expansion of operations into the US, 16% more seats as of next summer. But not just in terms of quantity, we're also adding new routes, which obviously we were stopped to do that during the pandemic and recovered in the last years. But now here is new routes. We'll be, especially good news for the Washington area, we'll be starting to operate from Zurich to Washington, Dulles every day. We bring the 380 back to Washington from Frankfurt. We'll be operating for the first time ever to Raleigh, Durham from Frankfurt, and also we're adding Minneapolis, St. Paul to our network from Frankfurt for the first time, but also Munich, Seattle, one of our major suppliers obviously being located there. So quite a bunch of new routes, new destinations, new aircraft to the most important part of our global network, which is the North Atlantic. But, and I'm sure we come to that, for me the North Atlantic is not just the commercial backbone of what we do, it is the backbone of global aviation in many, many ways. And I think Greg made some comments about the US setting the standards for global aviation, and that is true. And Europe obviously is the partner of the US in doing that. When it comes to the values, we connect with the transatlantic bridge we built. But also when it comes to labor standards, you name it, modernizing air traffic control, which is an urgent thing to be done. I know the FAA is a big topic in this country, and you look at the FAA as hopefully solving the issues you have in New York, for example. Also we are having, but other airlines, of course, have it more. But that's only the national view on the FAA. The FAA is also driving global standards for aviation. So I think, for me, looking at this market and coming here is more than just the commercial impact this has on our global business. This backbone of transatlantic being the backbone of aviation in many ways, since many years, by the way. I was in the Air and Space Museum yesterday. It's all about German and American aircraft there. So there is a history to that.
Well, definitely. It wasn't long ago, during the worst of the pandemic, that I know Lufthansa and many other carriers were struggling to fill seats on their planes. Things are very different now. So tell me, when you look in your crystal ball, what tells you the timing is right for an expansion like this?
Well, I'm around 30 years, and the situation has completely swung around. It used to be difficult to be a salesperson, and it used to be easy to be a procurement manager. Now it's the other way around. Sales is having a blast. The demand is so strong as I've never seen it, but the supply side is a huge mess, let's be honest. And Greg was worried about his suppliers. I'm worried about, not Greg, don't get me wrong, but I'm worried about my suppliers, where Pratt & Whitney is one of. We could sell a lot more seats if there were more aircraft available. 777X sitting on the apron in Seattle now for 3 years, I think, and maybe another 2 years until we can finally take the aircraft. Engine issues around the world, not just the Pratt & Whitney topic of the last days, but also shortages of parts everywhere. But not just the hardware. We are lacking people. It's pilots and air traffic controllers in this part of aviation in the US. It's more blue-collar staff in my home country and Europe. So the supply side is very, very stressed, and I do believe it will take some time to sort that out. And until then, we of course enjoy the strong demand, but we wish we could provide more flights than we even do. So in the US, we now go to 400 flights every week from our 5 hubs in Europe to the US, and easily could be more if we had more airplanes.
I want to talk about some of the trends that we've seen that have emerged during the pandemic. And one of them has been this desire, a lot of leisure travel, a lot of people willing to pay premium for different types of boarding and different things. Have you been surprised at the appetite that travelers have shown for these premium offerings? What do you think is fueling that?
Well, indeed, for our industry, this is probably the strongest time ever as in the last 30, 40 years. Let's leave the 50s and 60s out where flying was premium by itself. So I'm talking about the wide body ages. And we do enjoy a very strong focus of leisure or individuals on premium classes. But if you look at other industries, it would probably come less surprising. If you look at the car industry, especially the car industry of my home country, Germany, there has been now decades of strong demand on premium. If you look at Swiss watches, another home market of Lufthansa, Switzerland, strong focus on that also for now 30 years, almost unbroken. Handbags, high upper-end textiles. So I think there's many other industries where premium products and people spending more for a certain element of luxury and enjoyment has led the way, and now it really has arrived in aviation. So first class, now we have more individual leisure travelers in first class than corporate travelers, which historically was not quite the way. So I think it's indeed a nice positive surprise to see that happening after the pandemic in aviation. Looking at other industries, it's probably one of the global mega trends that people who have the money are willing to spend it on experiences like traveling besides something material like a car or a watch. So we don't mind as Lufthansa. We obviously consider ourselves a premium brand. So is Swiss, probably two of the leading brands in this regard in aviation. And this is, of course, very much helping our business model because we are operating in a high-cost environment. I mean, if you have to compete globally and your main production is going on in Switzerland or in Germany, you need to be as much better as you are more expensive. And for that, you need to have a higher share of premium products than maybe some other competitors.
Do you think that's a permanent shift?
As long as the global economy is healthy, and of course, that part of the global economy, let's be honest, I think there's a certain part of global consumers who are somewhat independent to ups and downs of the global economy, versus the lower end of the labor market. So I do believe, again, looking at cars, looking at other luxury goods of the last years, that this is probably quite a stable element in terms of purchasing power. And we need to provide the reasoning why it is worth to spend more. So if you are sitting in a first class and spending a 5-digit amount of euros or dollars for it, we better make sure it is worth the experience. But you do arrive in a different way in Washington on a 380 first class flight than in the last row. So I have to admit that. It's also great in the last row in Lufthansa, but it is more fun in the first class of the upper deck. In the 747 in the nose, by the way, even more enjoyable for those of you who haven't done that one. 747-800 going to Frankfurt, 380 going to Munich. You choose what you prefer.
See, I see people getting on their phones and checking the website.
Prices go up now after my advertisement, so better book fast.
I know we can't have a conversation on the future of the industry without talking about sustainability. So what can you tell us about Lufthansa's journey to reach the goal of net zero carbon emissions by 2050?
Yeah, we're very committed to that goal because all my stakeholders expect that from us. It's not just the governance around the world and regulators. It's my customers who expect us to be more sustainable. It's my shareholders and it's our staff. So I think this is a path we are on which we'll not divert from. The answers are mainly technology. People sometimes think the answer could be ideology. That doesn't work. The only answer is technology. It's engineers in Raytheon, in Airbus, in Boeing, Rolls-Royce, GE, all the other high-tech companies which work for us or supply us, but also our own engineers in Lufthansa Technik finding answers. The best way to bring the CO2 footprint down is to consume less fuel. So new engines, new aircraft, invest into the new fleet, which obviously you need money for to invest. We this year probably will be making like 15 euros profit per passenger, maybe $16. Some people think that's high. I think it's just what we need to make sure we can make those investments because they are the first answer to bringing down the CO2. The second layer is synthetic fuels, which right now, unfortunately, is all bio-based, which cannot be scaled. We need e-fuels because that's the kind of SAF you can actually scale. In Lufthansa, we have twice as much consumption or use of SAF than the global aviation industry, 0.2%. 0.1 is the average. all the SAF in the world could probably feed my fleet for like 10, 12 days, so a long way to go. So I think the US has shown, in this regard, led the way, incentivized not only the use of SAF, but also the production of SAF. Unfortunately, Europe is going the other way. They are putting penalties and high cost on trying to find SAF which is not available and forcing blending mandates which probably are not realistic in terms of ability. So I think US here has found a smarter way of doing this. And last but not least, we'll need compensation for many, many years to come before we come to real zero CO2. And that's not the best thing, but it's much better than nothing. But again, focus should be on reducing the consumption of fuel and bring up the share of SAF compared to fossil.
Got it. And I know we could talk much more, but we are unfortunately out of time. But thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you all.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.